Hello and welcome back to the Sounds Like Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Henne. I'm here today with Marnie Swedberg, who is fun and fast paced, yet peaceable and approachable. Her history includes fires, floods, car wrecks, business setbacks, burglaries, lightning strikes, and in her immediate family, cancer, head injury, and sudden death. She models comeback behavior, possibility thinking, and profound faith. Marnie is a missions ministry mentor, author of 14 how-to books, founder and director of womenspeakers.com, and host of the #1 ranked blog talk radio show, Marnie's Friends. She homeschooled the three Swedberg children from K to 12, managed the family businesses, which was a restaurant and a retail store, and has helped launch and grow women-led businesses and ministries worldwide. In 2023, she is hosting 9 virtual women's summits. Welcome, Marnie.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for coming today. So first thing that stuck out to me was all of your amazing resilience, first of all, but also homeschooling. I also homeschool my kids. We haven't graduated any yet. We have one in high school and one coming. So how do you manage to juggle all of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you read a bio like that, it sounds just impossible, right? But you have to remember that I am now going to turn 62 here in a couple weeks. So there's been some years to fit all that into, right? Didn't all happen when my babies were in diapers or toddlers or homeschooling. And I think the key is to really just keep asking God, what do you want me to do today? And what happens with us is sometimes we get going on a path and we forget to check in. And sometimes he's got a different path or something to add or something to take off the platter. So I would say just walking close with Jesus, letting him decide what I'm going to do, and then going forward with that. But I tell you what, you will never regret homeschooling. One of my favorite parts of my whole life was homeschooling our kids. Huge investment, but awesome. What the time you get with your children is just, you can't replace that with anything.
Yeah, I agree. And that was something that as we prayed about how are we going to do this education thing for our kids that God has blessed us with. And that's pretty much what I came away with was, you know what, I want to be able to really pour into them and invest in them
Mhm.
and and just really shape not to shelter, but to shape
Yeah.
and help them stand. And I have all girls, so stand as strong women. And I love seeing women like you that are just great examples of how to be a strong, godly woman. So can you tell us a bit about, you talked about the virtual women's summit and businesses,
Yes.
managing businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the summit. So this was a brand new thing. In 2002, which is over 20 years ago now, God put in my heart to start womenspeakers.com. And at the same time he put that in my heart, within a year, he had me step down from speaking for almost 10 years while I got to connect all the planners with the speakers who could go. And it's like this is really unfair, you know. How come I don't get to go and I get to just connect all these other speakers, and it's just that God just needed me focused on the finishing of our homeschool of our kids, and we had purchased a restaurant and a retail store, and what we were doing together with those then is the kids were working with us in those businesses to learn how to do biblical business. And so we were also training other kids in our community. And then, so all these years, over 20 years, I didn't get to host really hardly any events, very, very few. But as of last year, God put in my heart to host virtual events, these virtual summits for women. So we are having so much fun getting together, talking about different topics. We've got one coming up right now on money management. Then the next one is speaker training. And the next one is the family holidays, how to get through the holidays with less stress and more focus on Jesus and more fun with your family. So all of the summits have a different title and topic, and I could have never done it. Actually, I just couldn't have done it very many years earlier than now. But when he called me to do it now, even though it was still just this huge, huge learning curve, it was doable. And so I just praise God that he calls us to do big things, but he never calls us to do more than he's going to equip us to do.
Absolutely. I love what my mom always says. She says, he doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
There you go. That's
Don't
right.
be afraid to step into
Right.
something that God has for you, even if you're like, that is way too big for me. Like,
Right. Right.
what are
Right.
you thinking? So that's awesome. So if somebody's interested in attending one of your virtual summits, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, just go right over to marnie.com, marnie.com, my website, and you can find everything there. And I do have a mentorship program. So the people in the mentorship program get all the access to all the past trainings as well as the current ones. So that's fun. But otherwise, the summits are completely free. When they're live, they're free. So go check that out because you're going to, whatever your interest level is, you're going to really gain some good stuff from that. So we have anywhere from 8 to 70 or more speakers at these summits. They're major events.
Wow, that sounds amazing. What a great resource. So they just need to go to marnie.com
Yep.
and register, and it's free. That's
Yep.
awesome. And do you have a list of the different, because you said they all have different themes and different
Right.
titles?
So right now I do not have a list. It's still so new that I'm still that's such a brilliant idea, and I'm going to just go and put a list out there.
Okay.
But as the moment as we talk, nope, that hadn't occurred to me yet, but great idea.
Okay. No, that's great. Okay. So you talked about biblical businesses, and that's something that's really on mine and my husband's heart. He's developing a business, creating a business, and that is
Hmm.
something that we really want to
Yeah.
bring into the marketplace is
Yeah.
biblical business, kingdom focused business. Can you tell me what that means to you
Mm.
and how it's played out?
Well, I'm going to start with me being silly. And, sometimes we just like to tell our successes, right? But what God likes to do is likes to use our failures as well, our weaknesses. And when we were driving to church one day, we were homeschooling our kids, and I was involved in so many things. I was leading Awana, teaching children, fifth grade Sunday school, the women's ministry leader. I had about studies in my home. I was going to start up my girls' club again in the fall, and we were driving by a restaurant that had been just on the way to church one Sunday. And my husband said, "Have you ever thought of buying that restaurant?" And I'm like, "No, we never even go there. Why would we buy it?" So anyway, that was the end of it for me until the next Sunday we're driving by. And my husband says again, "Have you ever thought of buying that restaurant?" And I'm like, "No, but what's going on?" And if you can believe it, 6 weeks later, we owned that restaurant and I was managing it. He was still working full time in his corporate job. So I had never even worked in a restaurant. And I had written a kitchen shortcuts book. So that was a little help, but because I could bring, streamlining strategies in. But it was so the deep end of the pool. It was so the deep end. And when I asked him before we bought it, I said, "Why do you want to buy this restaurant?" And he said, "Well, I've been wanting to invest in a brick and mortar business, and I want something our kids can learn how to do biblical business principles in. And I feel like this is an opportunity for us to not only train our own kids, but many of the teenagers who work for us will be trained in these principles." So that's where it started. And I have to be honest with you that at the moment he told me that, all I could see was the big looming end of my life. Right? Because I had to literally step out of every last ministry role except we kept womenspeakers.com and I finished homeschooling the kids, and that was what I could do. And I could run this business and do those at the same time, but that was it. And so I was like, he's just, smoking dope. That is not going to happen. It's not possible. But that's exactly what happened with that first business is that we brought in teens and their mothers. So we would say, "We'll hire your 14-year-old if you will also come to work with them." And all of the teams that we had, they always described it the same way. Hardest thing we ever did, best thing we ever did was working together in a Christian business environment and learning best practices for how to treat people, how to treat each other, how to work hard, how to be accountable to one another.
That's great. That's amazing. What an experiment too, because I'm just thinking how that would go with dynamic wise, with
It was
depending
pretty
on the
crazy.
guy.
It was pretty good. I have to tell you one more funny story about that. So we were about 3 months in, and if you've ever owned or worked at a restaurant, you understand the amount of work that goes into a
Oh
restaurant.
yeah.
It is insanity. It's
Mhm.
crazy. Long, long hours, hard work. So we were about 3 months in, and my husband said to me, "So how's it going with the restaurant and homeschooling?" And we were coming up on the holidays, and I said, "I think that if I keep managing the restaurant, we need to put the kids in school after Christmas." And he's like, well, that is not happening. So what can we do? And he put on his thinking cap and did the most amazing thing ever. God just gave him, and he implemented what was called the Send Marnie Home bonus. So what was happening was I actually had enough staff and they were trained. And as long as everybody showed up for their shift, all things were well. But then what would happen is somebody would get in a car accident, somebody would get sick, somebody would do this or that or the other, and I would be working somebody's shift. So I was always in there working people's shift, not managing, but actually making the food, actually doing their job for that shift. And so what he did is he just said, okay, there are 18 of you. So here's the deal. If you guys need to miss a shift for any reason, you have to call other people and find your own sub. And if you get Marnie's hours down to, and I think we started it at 10 or 20, I can't remember, for the whole month that I had to cover shifts. It was a pretty, it was a pretty low number compared to what was happening. If they would cover that all, then they would get a 6% bonus on their paycheck. If they worked, they became this amazing team that covered each other's back. I was able to get out of the shift work and go back to homeschooling the kids.
Very creative.
So creative. I love working for God, right? He's just like, he comes up with the best plans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, in your bio, you talk about you've written 14 books. To me, that's just like mind blowing. And probably because, in part, the season of life that I'm in, I'm still homeschooling my girls. I
Right.
work in the marketplace also full time. So, it's a lot to juggle. But I have one book out and I have two coming. And I think 14. Wow. Can you tell us about some of your books and what they
Yeah.
can find in them, where they can get them?
Yes, absolutely. So everything that's like published is out at Amazon in book format. The other things are I published earlier on. I published some, like I published one book that's called the Girls Gifts and Games of no Girls Games and Gifts of Encouragement. It's big. It's like 150 books, but it never went past like being a spiral bound at the time. So you can get that download at Marnie.com. You can get all of them at Marnie.com, but also Amazon, any major bookseller for the books. They range everything from Kitchen Shortcuts, which was my first book that came out with St. Martin's Press. That one took me 2 years to write, 2 years to get published. And I just was done. When it was done, my publisher was like, okay, I know you have more books in you. And I'm like, I don't think so. And she said, she was like, you do, Marnie, you do. I know you do. And I was like, I don't have a clue. And she asked me to write a book on homeschooling. And I'm like, I can't, I am homeschooling right now. And there are so many good resources. Let me just tell you a great book to read. And that was kind of my litmus test for when I would write a book versus recommend a book. So that's why I've never written a book on time management, because honestly, I would just tell you most of the things that are in the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I would just say, just read that one. And, he has more than I would ever think of, but that's what I would have told you. So I do trainings, but writing a book, like you say, is such a huge undertaking. It is so labor intensive. And writing books, I have fallen in love with authors who wrote the book that I got to read, and I got to sit down for 2 hours and completely understand a process from beginning to end, or a story, or whatever it is that they took the time to spend months or probably years writing down so I could in 2 hours consume it and it could change my perspective in my life. So writing has just become something that God has me do when there's a specific need that needs to be met. And then he'll put a book in my heart to write. So I remember one day I was swimming laps in the pool, just talking to God. And I was talking to him about the book I still haven't written. See, we have our own ideas and he's got his own ideas, and our ideas always take the back burner. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know that yet, but that's true. That's how
Oh,
this
yeah.
works. So I was talking to him about the book that I wanted to write someday. And he said, well, first we're going to write the Flow Through Vessel book. And I was like, the what? What are you talking about? And he said the Flow Through Vessel book. I'm like, what is it? Like, what is it? It was so busy. I was so busy with the store and with the restaurant and with homeschooling, with the other stuff I was doing. I was like, I had not one moment. And then a couple days later, I got on a plane to go speak somewhere. And I sat down in the seat on the plane, and I met the lady who was 2 seats over. There was nobody in the middle seat, and she was by the window and I was on the aisle. And I met her and chatted for just a moment. And then she took a nap, and I took out my computer and I started just typing every thought that came into my head. Like flow through vessel, like what is that? Well, that's like a straw, or that's like an electrical wire, or it's like maybe an elevator. You get on one floor and you get out on another. And I was just writing all this stuff as fast as I could. And then after a while, and I hadn't really looked up, after a while, my computer died. It just died. And I was like, well, I guess I'm done. So I shut the computer lid, and the lady who was sitting next to me, she goes, what in the world have you been working on? So she was watching me just frantically type all this stuff. And I said, oh, it's incredible. God just put a new book in my heart. And I was just writing down all the ideas that were coming. And she said, so you're an author? And I said, I am. And she said, what's your book about? And I said, well, do you know much about the Bible or about living with God? And she goes, some. And I said, well, it's like most Christians believe that what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to be like a cup of fresh water for people in the world, and we're supposed to go around and we're supposed to pour ourselves out serving them, and they get the benefit of God living in us and us just giving ourselves away for them. And she goes, yeah. And I said, yeah, but we're kind of missing the part where he's the one that's filling us. We're actually not the cup, we're actually the straw. And if I'm submerged in Jesus, when they suck on my life, they get Jesus. But if I'm submerged in my own self, or worse, in some anger or unforgiveness or whatever it is, rage or just exhaustion, that's what they get. I said, I get to write a book about this. And she went on to tell me that her husband was a guy that worked with the gas companies during the time when there was the explosion underwater south of Texas there, and how the flow through system had broken. We just had this amazing conversation. And it was confirmation to God, to me, that this was the next step that he had for me. And I loved her response. And when I told her about the straw, that was the first thing I said to her. I said, we're like a straw. We don't have to come up with the cold water. We just get to let it flow through our lives. She threw her arms up in the air, leaned back in her seat, laughed, and said, you have just changed my life. And so that's what we get to do. When we let God walk us through the tough times in life, and there will be tough times in life. It might have even been this morning that you had a tough time. When we let him walk us through that, actually carry us through that, we emerged more dependent on him, more in love with him, because we see how he does it and how much he cares. And that's when we get to be truly a flow through vessel for him, and to share our lives with him. So if you don't get any other book, I would just recommend Flow Through Vessel, since that's where we went here.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, God's been just really highlighting that. And even in our church just went through the spiritual disciplines and talked about community. And then my pastor had spoken on community. And then the next week I was up and I talked on solitude. And I said, these seem like polar opposites, but they're perfect complements. Because
Exactly.
if I'm not carving out that time to be alone with Jesus and
Right.
alone with God, like Jesus was with the Father, then I can't properly bring myself to community, and community is not taking its proper place in my life. And they're going to get that anger. They're going to get that frustration. They're going to get the
Right.
exhaustion and the fear, rather than a whole me, because
Right.
it's more Jesus in me and through me
Yeah.
than me. You don't want me. Just me, you don't. you know?
Yeah, can we follow up on this just a little bit, because another thought's kind of coming to my mind about your uniqueness. So every person listening, you will have a different, let's say, amount of time you need alone with Jesus versus the amount of time you need in community. The extrovert type of a personality will spend a lot more time in community, less time alone, whereas the introvert will spend much more time alone, less time in community, in order to feel filled up and ready to actually give. And that's exactly right. So what happens in the world then is you've got, now I'm the person that's just about on the edge of both. I'm probably just tip a bit toward introvert, but most people would think I'm an extrovert. But what happens is you've got these beautiful introverts who get to do things like write books, do paintings, lots of things that an extrovert needs more people around them all the time in order to be okay. In this God's economy that we're in, the way that He built you is the most important thing for you to understand. So, just right now, look at your thumb, that one little inch of skin on your body. 1 inch of you could convict or acquit you of a crime in a court of law. 1 inch of you. Imagine how unique you are. And the reality is that if you don't know who you are in Christ or who He made you to be, just what you were saying, He actually created you uniquely. And you have to actually get on track with that. So the first point to start is to figure out who you are in Christ, to get alone with Him enough so you can figure out who you are in Christ so that you can let Him flow through you like He can't flow through anybody else. I want to share an example of this. I've written many songs over, for sure over 50 now. And some of them are with CCLI and sung around the world. But during the many first years of writing songs, I would just be minding my own business or playing a different song or whatever, and a song would just come into my head. And so I'd grab a notepad and I would just start writing down like words or chords or whatever came, and I would write these songs. Well, one day I was sitting in my living room at home alone, singing some of these songs, or my kids were probably there just in a different room, singing some of these songs. And I got through a few of them and I just looked up and I said, God, why do you keep giving me these beautiful songs and they don't go anywhere outside my living room? I mean, I get to sing them at one time at church when God first gives them to me. I'll share them with the church family, but they don't ask for more, and they just stay here with me and you. Why is this happening? And God just prompted in my heart, Marnie, this is the only place in the entire universe that I can come to hear those songs. Wow, that completely blew my mind, changed my perspective about life altogether, and made me so joyful to just sing them alone in my living room to God. That's how He sees us, you guys. Nobody can worship the way you do. If you have more than one child, you know that your children love you differently. Each of your children brings something different to your experience in life and as a parent. Some of them are so tender and kind. Some of them are like practical, down to business and organized. So, and that's how God sees us. He just loves you exactly how you made you. And what He wants is relationship with you. That's what He really wants. So however long it takes for you to feel like you're connected with Him, like you're filled up and ready to go out and do the world again, letting Him flow through you, that's how long you should take.
Absolutely. And that was a big part of what I had said in my message on solitude too, was that number one, you're going to hear how He calls you by name, which is going to be your identity, your
Yes.
unique position and who you are. And two, you can hear Him rejoice over you with singing. And
Isn't that incredible?
that's pretty incredible. I said, God, you're so cool. You're so awesome. But yeah, so that's awesome. I love this conversation. But can you tell us, I mean, we mentioned your website already,
Yeah.
marnie.com. Can you tell us what people can expect to find on your website?
I am one of those people who did not obey the rule that you had to just pick one lane and stay in it.
That's okay.
I am all over the board. So at the top, you're going to see the next upcoming two summits or webinars or whatever I've got going on. You'll see what's coming next for you as an online audience. Those are right at the top of my homepage at marnie.com. So just go there and check that out. Then right underneath that, you can find links to all of my books. And underneath that, you can see me speaking at a women's event. So you can catch a little bit of how I present. Under that, you can learn some more stuff, which I have no idea what all is under there. But definitely you can find the link over to womenspeakers.com. If you are a Christian women speaker who wants to get in front of more planners and more audiences, join us over there. There's both free and paid listings available. And then also my social links are kind of toward the bottom. I'm kind of everywhere at Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram and Pinterest. So if you want to catch a morning inspiration from me, just go ahead and follow me there. And then there's also a link to my YouTube channel which is where I do. So my radio show, what we've done in the past few years with Marnie's friends is we have gone to doing a live stream of the interview itself. And then we air that at LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And then after that, we edit that for the radio show. So if you want to follow that at YouTube, you can get those right out of the chute instead of having to wait for the radio show.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, go ahead to Marnie.com. Check out her books, check out her speaking events and her conferences. She has a wealth to share with us. I love your heart, love your message. You're such an inspiration to me. And don't forget to swipe, tap, or click over to DeborahHenne.com. Follow me on social, on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Deborah Henne Author. And let's not forget to tune into our thoughts to make sure they sound like Jesus's, so they sound like freedom.